Thank you, a very warm welcome, and I apologize for the slight delay. I was apologizing to Selma. I'm just running from another session I was moderating, so sorry to keep you waiting. A very warm welcome to our session, Ceasefire Forever. And it is an absolute privilege to be in conversation with Selma Dabbagh, a British Palestinian writer, who I'm sure you've been hearing over the last couple of days at the festival. Selma's first novel, Out of It, was published by Bloomsbury. And she's also the editor of the collection We Wrote in Symbols, Love and Lust by Arab Women Writers, both books that we're hopefully going to delve into this afternoon. But first of all, Selma, a very warm welcome to Karachi and to the Literature Festival. What a pleasure.
Well, it's wonderful to be here. Thank you, Saba. Thank you. And great to be in conversation with you.
Likewise. Now, I wish I could begin with something happier, but I'm going to start with a quote from Selma's novel, Out of It, which goes something like this. Deaths of children changed everything. Resistance movements started with dead children. In a recent essay Selma's written, there is a desire to eradicate Palestinians here, past, present, and future, and much of it is going on in the dark. Communications are often down and patchy at best. And then, Selma, in that piece, I noticed that you'd shared what the photojournalist Motaz Azeza wrote in an Instagram post, and she said, "We are a group of people being killed. We are a cause fighting to survive. How alone we are." Selma, I want to start by just asking you, how are you, and where and how does one even begin to process something that is not just close to home, but in many ways is home for you?
Thank you for the question and for the opening. It kind of, I don't know. I mean, I'm very up and down. I think this, since October, it's been so many different emotions going through you, but then you don't really have the space or the time to dwell on those emotions, and you don't feel entitled to really be making a fuss about yourself, because for me, I'm very conscious of my level of privilege and my level of distance. I appreciate my safety enormously. Like every night, I'm sort of glad that I know that my roof is going to be there in the morning, and that I know that there will be water in my taps, and I know I'll have food, and that my children won't get attacked on the way to school. So I feel privileged. I mean, sometimes it affects me in kind of, I don't know whether it's like physically, like sometimes I get stomach cramps, but I'm quite a sort of, my way of coping with things is to be quite upbeat. Yeah. I like to sort of turn things into a bit of a story or a bit of a joke, or to try and do something, or to act, or to, which it sort of works. It works generally, but I don't know really, internally it's been difficult. And it also causes divides with friends and people around you. I think I've lost people. I just, they've been silent, and I can't really forgive that. Yeah.
Selma, now before we get into the book and questions related to the conflict, I said to you beforehand that I'd really appreciate if you addressed a clarification question for our audiences, because people sometimes who I speak to get confused between whether this is a conflict between Jewish people and Palestinian people, or whether this is more about Zionists and Palestinians. And I wonder if, for the sake of our audience and myself, you're willing to get into that a little bit, because I suppose it's not right to conflate the two completely.
Right. No, absolutely. They should not be conflated. And I think Mohammed al-Kurd, if anyone's been following him, as a commentator, has said, as Palestinians, we are so well versed in making this distinction between what is anti-Semitic, which is a racist trope about a people because of the religion that they were born into. So it's about being Jewish. You are born Jewish. It's characteristics ascribed, given to that group of people. And that is always reprehensible, deplorable. We distance ourselves from it. It's got nothing to do with us. It's a European conception. Bad news, right? Anti-Zionism is a criticism of a philosophical way of, well, not philosophical, it was a sort of ideological movement born mainly out of the 19th century. It's the idea that Jewish people need a homeland to stay safe, among other things, and that is in Palestine. So it's an expansionist, settler, colonial ideology, and it is what the Israeli state has come to represent. That we condemn. I think what has happened recently in the UK, just in the last couple of weeks, it's been fantastic. There was a case in an employment tribunal where an academic who lost his job for making pro-Palestinian statements, he was called David Miller, he won the case at the employment tribunal. And what happened there was that the employment tribunal said his views as an anti-Zionist are protected views. They're a philosophical belief. And as such, he cannot be discriminated under the Equalities Act. That means that if you work in a university, if you're a student in a state school, any public sector service where you have anti-Zionist beliefs, you are protected. And this has been a really important and significant pushback. So I'm really grateful that the courts have got there. Sorry.
Yeah, no, thank you. And of course, as we were saying, Selma's written a novel, about people on the ground. So Selma, I want to talk about positionality, and I want to talk about narrative privilege, because you've said that you have the advantage of living abroad. You've said you've got a Western passport. So perhaps you've said you don't face threats on a daily basis as some other people might be doing. However, what this also means is that you're watching the crisis unfold from afar, which adds a degree of helplessness, a degree of frustration. Talk to us about what are the things that you have to stay mindful of as a writer when you're writing about the lives of people on the ground, in this case Palestine, who may not even have the privilege to tell their own stories.
Yeah, I mean, it's such an interesting question. It's one I wrestled over for so long before I even started writing. It's the kind of, particularly at the time, there was a lot of discussion about this idea of cultural appropriation and who has the right to tell the story. Yeah. And I felt this novel ended up being set in Gaza, but it didn't, in a way, need to be. And I felt my main concern was that I would offend Palestinians from Gaza in some way by getting it wrong. So what I did, I had sort of two tests. One was sort of just responsibility, just research as much as you possibly can. I was living in Bahrain at the time, where I didn't have a sort of Palestinian political community around me for the first time for a long time. And I feel almost like I went into Gaza through a periscope, like I dug in and I watched every documentary I could find, things on the internet, read as many books. I knew people from there. I took up bits of their conversation. But it affects the style, okay? You start writing in a more impressionistic way. I had a very big canvas. I wanted to get certain themes across. And I felt every writer has to kind of decide what is specific about you, where are you coming from? And I do think that the diasporic experience, and I'm half English, the sort of mixed race, diasporic, lived in 8 countries experience is a little bit a consequence of the kind of this expulsion, this being part of a dispersed people. So within that, I sort of found my groove. So I had these characters who were similarly a bit privileged, a little bit on the outside, trying to do a good thing, but not knowing what to do, living between England, London, the Gulf, and Gaza, and just having this extremities of experience, sort of, and hardship and challenge put upon them.
Yeah. Now, Selma, we hear a lot about a two-state solution to the Israel-Palestine conflict, but if you look at the demographic of the Palestinian population that lives in the West Bank, in Gaza, as well as in Israel, and then you're looking at Palestinian refugees that are outside these borders, and you combine them with the Jewish population of Israel, you get a kind of split. And so when I was researching for the conversation, there are proponents who are also talking about a one-state solution, this idea of a homeland that looks after both of these groups of people, you know, where resources and power can be shared. Similar to Bosnia Herzegovina, I suppose, where 3 different kinds of people are living. So weigh in on this a little bit, Selma, and talk to us about how you look at either of these prisms.
Right. Firstly, I'd like to say thank you for mentioning the refugees, because they are so often forgotten.
Course.
I mean, in the beginning it was called the Arab refugee problem, and now it's like people can know all about Palestine and not realize that there are like 53 refugee camps. There are camps in Lebanon which are a couple of kilometers across and have tens of thousands of people living in 4th, 5th generation. So thank you for remembering that. My basic outlook is a one-state solution, however far away that seems at the moment, because I feel if you had a 2-state, we've got apartheid, you know, it's been kind of agreed by all the main human rights organizations in the UN. You've got the system of distinction between people on the basis of race and religion, which is inherent within the Israeli system, inherent within its legal and its military repressive regime. If you have a 2-state solution, you still end up with apartheid in one area. And it's like there is no place now, I feel, for making distinctions of that kind and bolstering them with the law and with the military. It's just, you know, we're in the post-Second World War era. It was, you know, if we believe in self-determination, egalitarianism, anti-racism, you cannot have a state which is constantly perpetuating it and seems to think that there is some exceptionalism connected to a particular, you know, set of beliefs connected to one particular religion. And it's totally manipulated how they use this idea of it being a sort of this homeland for Jews, but that's a different conversation. So yeah, I am a one-state. Yeah.
Selma, let's talk a little bit about self-censorship and about footnoting. You know, I was reading a quote that you'd said, and you said you sometimes get these knee-jerk reactions from people who are very supportive of Israel, and the minute you sort of say you're from Palestine, that can set someone off. However, you might want to dress it up, as you said. And you said that means you get cautious in the way you speak, you qualify everything, you talk with your footnotes, you have to make sure that you're really not going to say something in a panel or a session which is going to be filmed or played on YouTube and then get distorted. Talk to us about if there was self-censorship going on when you wrote out of it, and you're also really a prolific writer today, doing kind of shorter journalistic pieces and other kinds of pieces about Palestine. So what's that headspace like?
God, I sound so cautious in that quote. I think I've become a little bit more forthright, and I'm pleased about that. It's very liberating. And I've got to the point where I just think a lot of the criticism that you get, it's being generated by small groups of people who are paid to do this stuff. There's a lot of bots who are like activating like this, and I just, you know, we've got to a point where it's like we all have to be standing up and making each other braver. So I think that's, you know, I've moved in that way, and that's liberating. There was a nice poster in one of the demos which said, "Palestine has set us free," and I really liked that. It was like a, you know, just a normal Londoner, like not necessarily a Palestinian character, but I like that idea that you can break those boundaries of fear with it. Self-censorship in the novel, I think that sort of fear of depicting people badly was playing on my mind, and in the novel I had conflicts between Palestinian groups, because it was huge at the time in the news. There was no way of avoiding it, between Fatah and Hamas. So that sort of is playing into the background. I did get a bit criticized for sort of airing dirty laundry, but the whole scene with Palestinian literature's moved on from there. I did get some criticism for that. I think also I was self-censoring a bit about, like, there was one short, like, sex scene, and, you know, somebody was very upset about that, said you can't have that, you can't have a Palestinian girl doing that. I also think that the the climate from when I was writing it 10 years ago has moved a lot, and it's one thing I wanted to explore. I didn't have Israelis in the novel, but I thought it would be crazy to have an Israeli suddenly dropping into the Gaza Strip. I mean, I guess I could have had one in London. But I think, I'm a lot less censorious than I used to be, and it's good. It feels good, yeah.
That is such a powerful quote or banner that you saw that really captures it, yeah. And I think that's a great segue into my next question, because of course the conflict's been going on for years, but unlike the past, primarily, well, not primarily, but one of the things that's different is that we're now in a world of social media. And so when other sort of more mainstream forms of media might try to conceal, you're having this kind of live streaming almost from these different areas, right? And as gut-wrenching as some of those images are, this is sort of offering a unique kind of voice to people, a sort of citizen journalism, if you will. Are you finding any difference in the narrative, or just in the kinds and numbers of narratives that can now sprout up versus this one monolithic version that we used to be hearing?
Yeah, I think it's definitely changed the way that we watch the news for a lot of people connected to this. I mean, it's been changing for a long time, but it's definitely shifted it much more so for me. And I think when we look back on this, it's going to be seen not just genocide, as a term, as a reality, but also like the war of the journalists. What is going on here? Because the number of journalists who've been killed has been, higher than anything since the Committee for the Protection of Journalists started reporting in '92. These are record levels of killings, and these are targeted assassinations. They know where they are. They go for their family, like with Wael Dahdour. And it's very. It's very worrying for journalists globally, because if Israel, the darling of the West, can do this and nobody says anything, then, what's to protect journalists anywhere? I mean, it started, of course, with the killing of Shireen Abu Akleh, and I was involved in a legal case on that, and that was bad enough, and there'd been a systematic pattern beforehand. But in terms of how we're watching the news, I think that these citizens reporters on the social media have been so powerful, have got across to such young audiences like Bisan, Plestia, Motaz Azeza, and their dynamism and their heroism. It's providing a sort of an example of what young people can do to people all over the world, and they trust them far more than the mainstream media. And I think that's been a it's obviously they're effective, that's why they're being killed, but but at the same time they are extraordinary examples, and I salute them in every way.
Now, Selma, let's talk a little bit about how the book has been received. You've spoken about two types of reactions, perhaps amongst others, but you've said for the general reader it can be quite hard to get someone interested if the conversation or the incidents are happening at a distance, if it doesn't directly affect you. And on the other hand, you've said that you've been heckled and harassed by Israelis, but not as much as I thought I would be. And you've said, although this is a relief on a personal level, it also worries me. It seems Israel's national psyche is being encouraged to be so sociopathic and lacking in empathy that no one comes out to challenge you. Talk to us about the reception to the book, and what do the silences of certain categories of people tell us?
I mean, I think it shows a degree of complacency, that they don't have to persuade people anymore, that they've got any kind of moral cause, that they can just act with impunity, they can say the most I mean, I think that quote is before October 7th. I mean, they can just make say the most racist, outrageous, genocidal things, test every type of drone and military equipment on a young population, get away with it. I mean, that's the concern. It used to be before that the Zionist movement was very much embedded to this idea of being righteous and socialist and, like humanity, like for the good of humanity, and like they had a certain image they wanted to preserve. The propaganda machinery seems to be like all gone awry. It's like clunky. Some voices it doesn't care about. Other people, like the journalists I was talking about, it'll just assassinate them. So it's working in a different way. It's a different kind of opponent that you have to deal with. Did I answer that question?
Yeah, absolutely. And just staying on that for a little bit, one of the things that stood out to me about the novel was that these characters are facing extreme situations. There's bombing, there's interrogations, there's violent deaths of children and family. And yet we see their emotional attachments, and we see a tenderness, and we see the ability to love and keep hope. And that's not completely different, Selma, from the accounts that are coming out of Palestine, parts of there, right? In fact, you've written in one piece about the solidarity and kindness and kind of people sharing food and of a solar-powered house with all the phones and laptops of the neighborhood being charged in this one living room. And that was really poignant. Talk to us about how in times of dire crisis, we still sometimes have the human capacity and capability to retain our empathy when it seems like these things are completely irreconcilable.
Yeah, no, I think that was the accounts coming from Gaza that I read, and also like before October. We have to kind of, this is much, much longer than just October. But it's like, I think there is this extraordinary thing, and I found it when I lived in the West Bank in my 20s and I was working for a human rights organization there. There's this idea that what you do and you say as a person is really important. People are very interested in you. They want to know what you're reading, what you're thinking, how you're because they might have to trust you at some point in time. They might have to really rely on you, so that you're checked out on a kind of like, with X-ray glasses. And it's kind of nice, because once you're taken in, you're really taken in. And then that builds strong bonds. And combined with that, I've noticed from talking to like witnesses coming, British Palestinians who've got family in Gaza, we were taking witness statements, it's just how tight a community that is, because it is locked in. If people don't know each other, they know the family name. And this is stronger, really, than the West Bank, which is much bigger and is divided up with all these horrible, walls and barriers, etc. So people kind of need to maintain their name, because it could affect others. And then there's this extraordinary sort of community, like around food, etc., that kept coming through, and a kind of tenderness. And it's sort of like the message of like, we are more human than you. However, and this quote from Suad Amari, where there are these young workers from the West Bank, and she's such a great writer. She's kind of, she does this thing at like 50, like she dresses up as a young Palestinian worker to cross the border into Israel to just seek work. All these boys wanted, and they were being shot at and everything. And one of the other boys says, what you have to worry about is the blackness of their hearts. It's like this idea that you can't communicate in the same way, that things have become so, and I'm not saying that as a sort of racist trope against all Israelis, I qualify that. But I mean, it's just like the idea that things are so, that you have to, that tenderness is what's going to keep you alive, what's going to sustain you, that love can sustain you, I suppose, in some ways. Sound like a Sufi.
No, but that's beautiful, absolutely. Selma, we've got a little bit of time before I open the floor to questions, and I want to bring in Selma's other book, which is this one. I don't know if you've seen it yet. And Selma, this is a fascinating anthology about love and lust by Arab women writers. And in the introduction, you've said that you grew up in Kuwait, like many teenagers, in opposition to your location, which appeared to you to represent confinement. And you've said that this collection is the product of a not untroubled love affair with the Arab world. Talk to us about this love affair and how We Wrote in Symbols kind of pushes back against some of that confinement that you experienced growing up in Kuwait.
So I think the thing with Kuwait is that we were very confined, but that almost meant that you wanted to do the thing that you were prohibited from doing most. Perhaps there was that kind of energy going on. And then I came, so in Kuwait, I had Islamic religion classes at school and Arabic, and both of them were taught so badly, so hatefully, so boringly, you know, that I really pushed against the whole thing. So as a result, sadly, my Arabic is not as good as I'd like it to be. But then when I came, this anthology was, I was reading this anthology of classical poems by Arab women writers. So from the pre-Islamic era right up to the fall of Andalusia. And some of the voices are totally what you'd expect. They were things like, you know, a woman crying over the death of her brother in battle, okay? Other women were talking about their love for their husband who was in political exile in Morocco, for example, or their desires. And the way that they expressed their desires, often physical desires, was very practical. And it was no shame, no sort of sense of trying to provoke. It was just this is what I need, you know, deal with it. So it really was an eye-opener to me. And then after the Arab revolts of 2011, there was really very little that was positive. And I always feel this thing that everything depicted with the Arab world is negative. Whereas actually when I'd lived later in Cairo and in Jerusalem, there'd been so much I had actually loved, you know, and so much energy I got from the women. And I never felt that was being shown. So after the Arab revolts, there were suddenly a lot more women who were writing about these things. And I'd felt the slight chill factor doing out of it, right? Yeah. So I thought this is such an important part of storytelling. Absolutely. And yet most women writing in English or writing to be published in English have this kind of don't quite know how to handle it. So let's see the ones who've been daring. Yeah. Let's put them together. So I put together the old ones with the new ones. And there's a gap in the middle of about 500 years where there's very little, fall of Andalusia up until the late 19th century, very few women's voices. But the early voices predate anything coming out of Europe by women. You know, it's very old poetry by women. And then, so I put it together. So it's this wonderful kind of, and I mixed up the time periods. So when you're reading it, you don't know if it's, and I wanted to just throw people's presuppositions in every way and form, and to say, well, you know, don't assume that we're more liberated now than in the past, because it's not a continuum. Don't also think that all signs of emancipation come from the West, because that doesn't have to be. We can look at organic sources sometimes, but I'm very much in favor, as I was saying on a panel yesterday, for a sort of idea of accept the West on its own, on your own terms. And then the last point was I just loved these women. I mean, they were the best. It was during lockdown, and I was dealing with these women who were inventive, they were funny, they were brave, they were, you know, some of them were very sensuous and it was just very quiet. Some of them were in your face, you know, that thing of when people are told you can't do something, that they just go, right, you know. Yeah. I mean, it's not my personality at all, but I was wow, okay, great, you do it. You know, Jemana Haddad in Beirut, who's had an erotic magazine and then it got closed down, so she's right, I'm going to do it again. It's how do you do that? Yeah. I mean, I want to be brave like you know. So it was a great experience.
No, and I love that, Selma, because I think there'll be many in the audience who can relate to this as well. It was my next question, and I'm really glad you answered it, because here in Pakistan, when I think about feminism in Pakistan and I think about women in Pakistan, I couldn't agree more with you, both about the fact that the history of our women and their empowerment often doesn't get its due. So it's somehow this brainchild of modernity, we think. And secondly, I'm also a little tired of this saving narrative. The Pakistani woman needs to be saved by the West. I think we're done with that. It's clunky, it's cookie cutter. And I couldn't agree with you more, that kind of look at your local syntax whilst imbibing and exchanging, because that's where it becomes most generative. So thank you very much for bringing that up. Final question before I'm going to open to the floor. Selma, you know, there was a quote that I heard at NYU, where I teach in Abu Dhabi a few years ago. And the original quote is by Sir Henry David Thoreau, but this is a mashed up version that a guest lecturer shared. And I want to just get your reaction to it. He said, most men and women lead lives of quiet desperation and go to the grave with the song still in them. So he said, most men and women lead lives of quiet desperation and go to the grave with the song still in them. Now, of course, we know that quiet desperation is abound when we think about this conflict and elsewhere. People have seen too much, there's too much that'll stay, trust is at an all-time low. I want to ask you that in this maddening, chaotic context, as a storyteller and an artist, what is your song for Palestine?
Wow. What is my song for Palestine? Oh gosh, I mean, I guess it's, I mean, one hopes for, you hope for liberation and self-determination, and, you know, like, that people will sit up and recognize it and they'll say that this is just too much, just rein everything in, just reshift the world order around this. That's what one hopes for. As a storyteller, you want, I mean, I think one thing the Palestinians have caught up with so quickly is getting articulate voices, a lot of them female, in front of like social media, the media, like, you know, all very savvy, like lawyers like Noura Erakat. We've got some fantastic voices out there and we're really challenging. And you just, so my song for Palestine is, yeah, I guess, you know, peace, ceasefire now, you know, I couldn't believe on day 2 that they weren't calling for a ceasefire. When Blinken was told, delete that tweet, I was like, that's outrageous.
Yeah.
Day 2, and we're 4 months in. So I can't really think very much beyond that. I mean, I'm trying not to think about how much debris there is all over Gaza, you know, apart from dead bodies and broken hospitals and libraries and, you know, archaeological ruins and wounded people who can't get out to the hospital. I'm trying, you know, that we need to start, something has to happen so we can heal. I mean, it's got to be, I don't know, like a song. Yeah, I'll work on a song.
No, thank you. And we've got time for questions, so I want to open up to the floor. Do we have a mic to pass to people who, so if you've got a question, you can raise your hand. And yes, the gentleman in the third row.
Hello, Selma.
Hello.
What I wanted to ask, what's been happening since 7th October in the Gaza Strip has been witnessed by the whole world, genocide on a mass scale, and the world is a witness to it. I want your gut on, do you think a two-state solution is still possible, or have we crossed the line?
I mean, as I said, I would prefer a one-state solution. I think any kind of so-called two-state that is on offer is going to be something really like a lot of Bantustans. It's just going to be small pockets of land with very much controlled borders. I don't even think that there's much of a movement for a two-state solution. I think I can't see any activity going on that track even. I mean, any solution is better than no solution, which is what we've got at the moment, so I shouldn't be too disparaging about it, but I think it's going to be very difficult to sort of live peaceably next to, another state which has done something like this, if that isn't like a complete, like, sort of, you know, you need real neutral arbitrators coming in and getting involved and for the Palestinians to have a voice in it. At the moment, I think it looks like anything that happens in this respect will probably have some notional, a couple of, you know, Palestinians who have no representation of anybody being there, but it just being negotiated above their heads and being another disaster. I mean, yeah. As I said, though, I think my fundamental problem with two-state is you still end up with apartheid, unless you're going to kick out all the Palestinians from inside 48 and have a population transfer. And I wouldn't want to call for that. I wouldn't want transfer, and I wouldn't want apartheid. So I don't really think it's possible, but yeah.
Yes, in the front. Oh, you'll just get a mic. I think that'll be a mic there.
Where do you get your hope from when it gets tough? Like, what keeps you hopeful?
I think I'm naturally quite buoyant. And I keep myself very busy. I think keeping busy really helps me. I just have, I have the most extraordinary group of friends. A lot of them we connected like in my 20s, and they're very engaged on Palestine. And a lot of them are very funny, and all of them are very clever, and most of them are quite brave. So I like being with them, and they inspire me. Yeah.
Yes. You can go. Okay, you can go right after her.
Hello. Even though I believe in it with all my heart, but I just want you to say a bit on it too. So does boycott matters? I wholeheartedly believe in it, but we can see that there is still a debate going on it. So as a Palestinian, what will you say about it?
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that. What do I say about?
My question is, does boycott matter? As a Palestinian, what will you be saying about it? Because I have seen that there is still a debate going on this topic.
Does
boycott?
Oh, boycott. Boycott is incredibly important. Thank you for the question. And it is, I think, it is biting. I think it is having an effect. And I think it's something that we can all do as individuals. As Professor Massad was saying yesterday, I mean, it's like with McDonald's, etc., across the Arab world, it's losing huge share revenues. I think Ben and Jerry's also took a stand. That was them as company owners, which was fantastic and needs to be celebrated. I think that's another thing I'd say for hope. Every small win, you celebrate it. However small, you've got to keep going. We're in it for the long term. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's something I think about a lot. We always talk about how do we convert people to the Palestinian cause. It's like, how do we keep them in?
Yeah.
You've got to keep them in. So some of these things, social and celebratory, I'm kind of into. I think it's boycott, divestment, and sanctions are every individual taking their own, reading the list of what they should be boycotting, taking individual steps. It's really important. It might seem small, it might seem a bit annoying, you might not always 100% comply, it's quite difficult, like with environmental things, it's difficult, but do what you can. Just do what you can and it will make a difference. So that's great. And there are all these restrictions coming in the US and the UK with regards to the right to boycott. And that is because it's effective. It can work. But they can't close down on all our civil freedoms. They can't. It's just, not if they want to stay with the sort of state myth building sort of narrative of being liberal. Thank you for the question. Yeah.
Yes. I'm coming to you. Just here, then here, and at the back.
Hi, this was a really good session. Thank you for it. So I just wanted to say that there are a lot of people who are in positions of authority, like political authority, who can do things. And then there's people like us. There's not much we can do except like maybe post about it on social media or boycott. But even that gets taxing at times. Like watching dead babies every day, it has an emotional impact. Not everybody is wired to take in that kind of content on a daily basis. I remember like deactivating for a bit, but then I thought it was kind of selfish. So I got back and I was like, I need to be up to date. I need to know what's happening. I need to research and I need to because this is the least I can do. So where do you think, like where people who have very, very limited power in their hands, who have very limited authority, who cannot reach out to very many people or have any power to change things, what do you think their role is? Like what can they do? Where can they draw the line? Where is it okay for us to draw the line where we, maybe stop consuming content because it is personally having an impact on us? Just that. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think just do what you can and sustain it. Sustain it beyond the particular violence going on at the moment. I think you do need to protect yourself from some of the content, and it can become like counterproductive. I mean, you want to be aware, but if you get to the point where you're becoming just desensitized and not having a response, and you're just getting depressed and you can't act, then that's not useful. You have to sustain yourself. You have to kind of look out for yourself as well. Form a community of some kind. Form a group of people around you who feel the same way. Become more well-versed at putting the arguments across. I think in Pakistan, most people are familiar you know, and are sympathetic. So it's not as, you don't need to have this kind of artillery with you all the time in the same way. Yeah, and every little bit helps, you know. I don't know enough about what the scene is here in terms of what one can and can't do, but maybe try to find access to the people with some influence and power in one way or another, and see if, you know, that there's a lot of sympathy at the moment. See if, you know, what issues can be done here to, you know, to help, you know, to meaningfully help.
Yeah, just right.
There's a hand at the back.
I'm coming to you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I was just curious about the meanings of one state idea. I'm here.
Oh, yeah,
Okay,
sorry.
yes. So I was just curious about the one state that you have in your mind, and this question is actually, you know, coming from a recent publication that I just read. It was RAND Corporation's publication, and it stated that 5 possible solutions, and one of the solution was one state, and that one state solution, it was stated, it was, I mean, based on the interviews from the West Bank as well as from the Gaza residents, that with the Israeli political control and Palestinians are living peacefully with them. So is that the conception that you have in your mind about one state, or do you have the same traditional min al-nahr ila al-bahr, something like that?
So in that model, it was that, I mean, to be honest, like my sort of vision is a big effort towards like saying we cannot live with these distinctions in the law. The Israeli state inherited all of the military legislation, emergency laws that the British put in place, and they're using them against the Palestinian population, making distinctions based on them being Arab, non-Jewish, and it's dismantling those laws. I mean, I think that those are like, and the conception behind it. So it would be that with a right of return, it would be from, you know, from the river to the sea, the justice for all people within that, living on equal terms, at least having the protection, like having an Equalities Act, basically, you know, you can do it with the law. I mean, it's really not that complicated. You know, if the political will's there, you could do it within 2 weeks, right? It's just you know, to start the thing in process. I'm probably not the right person to give you exactly the answer you want. I do concede on that. Yeah.
Yes, we'll go 1, 2, 3, if that, and 1, 2, and then 3. So at the back, 2, just here 1, and then in the red scarf, 3.
I just want to ask you, you mentioned the David Miller case, and it seems that in Britain, just saying anything that's critical of Israel is loaded with danger and fraught with kind of, you know, terror almost. So Britain, like England at least, seems a very hostile environment for anyone who's talking up about what's happening in Gaza and criticizing Israel. Have you had any personal experience of this, or do you know of cases in which...
No, but a lot of people around me have. I mean, I've had hostile reviews. I've been heckled. I've had, actually, you know, it's like it's my daughter at school. It's that's where it's really like getting to me. It's just very innocuous social media posts that she's put online, girls going out of their way to, you know, even though she's on private settings, find those, report them to their head, get her being called in again and again, suspended. You know, that's driving me crazy. And it's really unfair, you know, it's coming against her because she's the only Palestinian in that school in a quite, you know, different North London. But I do know people who've been, like in the 90s, there were a lot of arrests of Palestinians, which was for around an event where the evidence was actually very slim, and it's now there's an MI6 officer who's saying that the whole thing was a sort of setup. So that was a kind of a point of fear in the 90s. Sorry, I don't know why I mentioned that because it's too long. It's mentioned in Out of It. I draw on it and Out of It. My university, Goldsmiths, where I did my PhD, there were a lot of the academics were being rooted out. They're now having an anti-Semitism inquiry into the university. Seems completely unnecessary. The union leader was really smeared and attacked, young girl. There's, I mean, it's sort of all around me. It hasn't, I think, yeah, it hasn't got to me as badly, yeah. But it's, I mean, I feel that the law, it has to protect Palestinians. If it can protect Palestinians, it can protect anyone, you know? It's, we're the like, the most vulnerable group in the UK at the moment. And the US, it's all the same kind of tactics being used in both places, yeah, yeah.
The gentleman there, and then I'm coming to you at the back.
Hello, my question is that given the interest that West has towards Israel, so do you think it is ever possible for the West, US, to actually give Palestinians those rights within a one-state solution? And once it's a one-state solution, it would actually, in my view, it would actually, you know, make it an internal conflict rather than an international conflict. It would make them more weaker, if you see it that way, and make it a more, you know, localized affair rather than the current situation where it is at least being, you know, debated at an international level and seen as a proper conflict between two countries rather than an internal problem.
Right. Okay. Is there? Can I take it? Is there a specific? I mean, is that? I missed the question.
I'll just see, Frigid. Don't you think that within a one-state solution, given the interest that the West has towards Israel, they would ever let Palestinians have equal rights in everything, from in military or within the ruling class?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I mean, I do appreciate it is very, very kind of almost far-fetched, but it's for me, it's like you have to go for what you think is the ideal, even if you don't think you can get it, even if you don't know that you can win. It's like, what should it look like? Is it not possible? And I met somebody who was in the anti-apartheid movement against South Africa, long-term campaigner, boycotting Barclays Bank. That's what she did, and she thought it was her job forever. And she said just one day it stopped. So things can change. You know, public pressure, if you bring in boycott, if you bring in divestment, you bring in sanctions, you change the vocabulary, you show the threats to Western democracies, which is coming about by the exploitation of authoritarianism by Israel, possibly we've got a chance. I mean, it might be quite far away, but it might be around the corner. We don't know, but we have to, like, push with everything we have, just in case, you know, in the hope that Israel doesn't want to live in this kind of, you know, really extreme religious, militaristic kind of way for the rest of the time that it's in the region, because I can't imagine it's very pleasant for Israelis either. I mean, whatever their standard of living, I think that the, you know, indications in terms of domestic violence, and God knows what the fallout from this will be. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, so I hope. But I get your point. It is really difficult, really challenging. But it doesn't mean we shouldn't fight for it.
Yeah. The lady at the, there's somebody at the back. I can't see properly. Yeah. There was someone behind you first and then coming to you right after that. You. No, there was no question there?
Yeah, there was.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Hi.
Yeah.
Sorry, this is a question from the UK context and related to what you were saying earlier, Selma, about schools and universities. I find it interesting from a UK context that there's so much pushback from schools, universities and the labour movement, which are traditionally liberal institutions. So I wonder, I mean, I have my own opinion, but I wonder about what you think about why the pushback is coming so heavily from liberal institutions in the UK against the Palestinian cause specifically.
Okay, well, there are a number of different factors at play here, and it's a really, I think, okay, so with education, it's not just coming from the schools, it's coming from the government in terms of its push of the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism. So that is a definition which conflates anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism, particularly in the examples. So that there's a push for that, which is making people feel a chill factor throughout the school system. There's also been a systematic changing of educational materials by individual lobby groups. And this can get to be so extreme that you can pick up a book on like religious education, and there's a question like, why has Israel got the most moral army in the world? Like in a standard textbook for the whole of like all these impressionable 13-year-old Brits, you know, to read. It's like, there's that coming from the groups. There are also other groups which overly report on anti-Semitism on one hand, and also produce materials supposedly about anti-discrimination, but actually within them, and they go around the schools doing these little, like, you know, I don't know, there's one called Solutions Not Sides, and it all sounds very sort of liberal and lovely, but it's actually got a lot of quite pernicious depictions of, you know, what the Palestinian movement means. And then there's, within academia, I feel that part of the legacy of like the Palestinian scholarship has had within academia has been so impactful on this sort of post-colonial movement in social sciences, the humanities, English literature, comparative literature. You know, you can't, it's been revised in the last 20, 30 years, that you were getting these people who were like very articulate academics, and they were saying, well, we can't have this. So now they're trying to find other ways of removing them. It's because they were effective, they're removing them, and it's an indoctrination system. You know, it's like changing the history of things, you know? So I think that's, and they're sort of soft targets sometimes, and they don't know who an individual school might not know who this group is coming to them saying, oh, look, we've got these nice materials for you to put in your library and share around, you know? And on the Palestinian side, we're catching up, but it's slow. We don't have the resources. We don't really have some of the organizational capacity yet. Yeah.
I just wanted to add, Selma, to what you were saying about the one-state solution. In effect, it is a one-state. Israel is running the largest open-air prison camp. It is administrating it. It is bombing it. That's called Gaza. It controls the security of the West Bank. It's making settlements and infringing on whatever is left of the West Bank. It is already a one state. All that is needed is for Israel to stop being racist and stop the apartheid, give the citizens of West Bank and Gaza the equal rights of the rest of the country, and call it something more than Israel. Yeah. But it is already a one state, and the United States is obfuscating the issue by talking about two-state solutions now. It is a one state, and it is the apartheid that has to end.
Yeah, thank you. No, that's very, very well put. I absolutely agree. Thank you.
Yes, we've got time for one final question. Mm-hmm. Sure.
Yeah, go ahead at the back of the mics at the back.
The mics, and then we'll bring it to you. Yes, go.
Thanks. I feel as though I've had it twice. I feel very lucky. Thank you. But just to kind of come back on what you were saying then about there being an indoctrination process from the Israeli perspective within British schools and institutions, do you feel part of the issue might then be that the Palestinian side is more fractured in that you've got Muslims who are traditionally very pro-Palestinians, you've got leftists that have been traditionally very very pro-Palestinians, are now broadening into some of the liberal quarters as well. Again, I'm talking from a UK perspective, but I'm not sure how much of those voices are bridged, and I think that's a lost opportunity, and maybe that's because of inherent prejudice between the different pro-Palestinian groups. I wonder what you've got to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in and out of the sort of Palestinian activity scene in London for almost 3 decades now. So, and I would say it's improved a lot. I totally hear you, but I think it's improved a lot in terms of the organizations being able to work together a little bit more. and to be able to share information about what they're doing, to try and make themselves more effective. I do think that there's the inherent nature of non-governmental organizations, the problem which is fundamental to them, which is that most of them are trying to get funding from the same sources, so that they start sort of like not being as collaborative because they're slightly put up against each other in competition. That can sometimes happen. But I think I would definitely say as a network of individuals and people, there's a lot more collaboration, and it's getting stronger quite quickly, but it's got a way to go, and I think it sometimes takes something like this for people to realize like how impactful this issue is, both on the UK in some way, and also because of Islamophobia and everything else that results from it, but also on Palestine, and then you can, hopefully use that energy to push back and make a difference together, collaboratively. Yeah.
Did you have a final comment to make? Inko de dijiyega, please. Can you pass him the mic, please?
Well, I go back to my days of my youth, 1970. I used to interact with the Palestinians, and they had a very simple program. They said, we want a Palestinian state where Jews and Christians and Muslim can live together in peace. So what we're really talking about, the one-state solution, is that vision.
Yeah.
Not a racist or a Zionist state. And surely if that can be arranged, but it is America and the West have sort of put their weight totally behind Netanyahu and the West. I personally feel that they have overstretched themselves, and they're going to pay a heavy price internally, because there's a lot of resentment growing up in America and in the Western world, in England and European countries, and they're questioning that. And so we have this wonderful vision of people taking in the streets, and I treat that as Western civilization. And of course their governments are Western imperialism, but at a people-to-people level, there is a lot of support for the Palestinian cause, and that is very heartening.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's good, wonderful to put it in the historic context. I saw a film once called about the Palestinian resistance by Christian Ghazi. I think it was made in 1970 or 72. But it was like showing all the Palestinian kids in the refugee camp being taught Hebrew, because they're like, well, you've got to be able to like understand when we go home, like you've got to be able to talk to the, and that was the vision. You forget that now, but I mean, yeah.
I want to thank you, Selma. Thank you so much. I want to thank all of you for really generative questions, and
Saba, amazing.
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Enjoy your evening.